Hello, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to try to extol the virtues of a good date table. When you're doing analytics, a lot of information is broken down by date, and there's a lot of things that you would do with the date, such as figuring out what month it's in, what day of the week it is, whether it's a weekday, a weekend, a holiday, what quarter it belongs to. There's a lot of different reports that rely upon understanding the attributes of a specific date. And I've seen a number of posts going around through Alteryx and other sites where people are sharing formulas to determine information about a date as you're querying with it, as well as methodologies to generate a list of dates. For example, let's say you want to know what all of the weekend dates are for a month. How do you generate that list in order to do some analytics with it? And while those formulas make sense, they're a bit tedious to write, they're pretty hard to use, everybody has to learn to do it. And what I've always done when I've entered into any environment with analytics, being it self-served analytics or within a data warehouse, what I like to talk about is creating yourself a really useful date table. In the dimensional world, it would be a date dimension. And again, it doesn't really matter if you call it a date table, what name you give it, whether it's a dimension. What matters is what you put in it. And there is no definitive definition for what you want in your date table. It depends on the analytics that you are using. The company I worked at many years ago, we sat down one day with the analysts that were generating reports, the BI people, and tried to determine what we needed as far as the attribution of a date was. And we came up with nearly 200 attributes for a date that were necessary to get reporting done. Well, that seems like a lot. It really wasn't hard to maintain. Once you generate your date table, it needs very little maintenance going on. So basically you build it and put it on the shelf and use it as you need it. And so what I would recommend if you're getting into analytics that require information about dates is that determine what you need about an attribute within a date, and then build yourself a date table if you have access to a database, or alternately create a Alteryx database file that is the same as a date table. And as you find additional attributes that you need for your date, just go ahead and expand out your date table to make it to being what you want it to be, because now you don't have to figure out all these formulas every time you're trying to do a report or figure out a way to generate a list of dates that match certain criteria. You already have that in that table. You can simply query against it. So this is just a basic date table that I created very simply. Most of it is done through formulas, and I used Alteryx to generate the records as well as to determine the attributes values. That being said, there's one piece of this that's a little bit tough, and that's down here with the holiday indicator. Holidays are a bit tougher to get to, primarily because they're associated with your company. What I did for this exercise was to go ahead and pull a lot of holidays off of federal government websites, printed those as a PDF, used my PDF extraction workflow to go ahead and indicate which of those dates are indeed a holiday. Hopefully your company has the ability to send you a spreadsheet of holidays, and you would have to keep this updated on years going forward as more information is known and when those holidays are finalized. So what did I do with this? Well, quite simply what I ended up doing is creating a couple of macros, and I will show you what these macros do. But all of them just simply exercise an extraction from the date table, in this case a date dimension, and either returns the records or returns a summarization of what's going on within those dates depending upon what you need to do. So what these macros do is they come in with a beginning date and an ending date, and then they do some processing. And again, your macro should be able to run independently. So let's go ahead and run this, just take a look at what it's doing. And I have two versions of these. This one goes against the MySQL database. There happens to be a date dimension out there, and so what I'm doing is I am executing a query that returns all the columns from my table, and it is simply selecting all the records by putting a range of 1911 to 2099 just to make sure it covers everything, and then the macro itself will modify these two values so that when it executes as a macro, it returns just the range that it's asked to return. That being said, it's very simple then to select out what we need. I had to change calendar date to a date because in MySQL it is a date time and all I need is a date portion. I then did a bunch of summarization of counts. All I have to do is count up on those or summarize those indicators because it's a 1 if it's true, a 0 if it's false, so therefore it's very easy to sum them up in order to find out the number of holidays, the number of weekdays, etc. And then an overall count just to see the number of days within that range. And then I reformat those down to integer 32s and return those as output. So you can see that within my date table or date dimension that I have, there is 7,000 plus records in there with a number of holidays, weekdays, and weekends. Very simple to use, very simple to see what it's doing. We can go ahead and create a very simple workflow that will exercise this macro. So to grab that, I'm going to go ahead and start out with just a simple range. So what I have here is a beginning date and an end date. So I want to actually see in 2021 all the days that are in November. I set those to strings, making it so it can go into the macro very easily. I then simply insert my macro. In this case, it'll be the summarize date range from MySQL. Connect it up. Put a browse on the end of it just to make sure that I get that done. Match up what is the beginning date. It is start, and the ending date is end. I can go ahead and run that. And it very simply returns me the data that we had seen. 30 days in November, 3 holidays, 22 weekdays, 8 weekends, and 19 workdays. It's 3 holidays in November. Now, if you don't have access to a database to store this date table in, again, you can go ahead and load that into an Alteryx table. And so here we have that Alteryx table. And now I have to do it slightly different because I cannot execute a select statement against that data. I just simply bring it all in. And so what I do instead is I go ahead and have a custom filter, which is basically looks the same as the where clause. So the WID, the WID, is greater than or equal to 1911 and less than or equal to 2099. I can do the same summarization, do the same select at the end, and there goes my data. So we can quickly pull up this workflow, insert this macro as well. It is a summarize from a YXDB as opposed to the database. Drop my browse onto the end of it. Link it up to start and end. Give it a run. And you can see by clicking on this that the results are the same whether it's going against Alteryx or against the database. And you can see how fast this is. Your date tables are never going to be huge. Next we want to look at is actually if you want to know what specific days are. The request I had for a report was to generate a report for all of the events that occurred during a work day in November. And to do that, I need to know what are the work days in November. So we start out again with the exact same input data going into the MySQL database. And now all I have to do is to find a workday is to filter on that indicator. If that is equal to a 1, it is a workday. So it's very easy. I would end up making a lot of different macros for the different types of data that we might want to retrieve so that the user doesn't have to worry about the details of doing that, but simply call my macro. So now this is returning all those dates. I return all the data that is in this workflow so they can decide what they want to do with for the specific reporting. So if I run this, this will return all of my work days that are in this table. And you can see if you look at the holiday indicator, they are all zeros. So that leads me to believe that it's a weekday without a holiday, and we're pretty good to go. Makes it very simple to use. We'll go back to my workflow here, the same range here where I want to see the actual records. So I will insert the macro and I will get it the get date range from MySQL. Hook it up to my ranges. Start, drop a browse onto the back of it. Run this out. If we look at the summary, we see that there are 19 work days. Look at the detail, and you see there are 19 records that are each record that is an actual date in November that is a work day. So this way I can then use this to join or filter, do some other processing associated with a set of data. And wrapping this up finally, all that we do is we take our macro that was for the YXDB file, the Alteryx table, and I simply put the additional filter on the end for the workday indicator equals 1 and return that data. Everything else was left the same. We can simply insert this macro. Connect it to my input. Connect it to a browse. Identify the beginning date as start, the ending date as end. Take a run through this. And as we know, we needed to see 19 coming out at the end. Oh, we put the summarize in here by accident. Maybe you saw that and were getting ready to holler at me, but I couldn't hear you because this is being recorded and not live. Let's go ahead and insert our macro. Summarize date range. Get date range. There we go. Drop this onto it there. Start, end. Give it a run. And there we go with our 19 work days in November, the details of the attribution of those records. So again, forget about all those fancy formulas that people are trying to get you to use in order to create a range of dates or to figure out what a date is, whether it's a weekday or a weekend. You don't need to do that. You just need to go in and create yourself a date table, create the attributes that you need, indicators to show you a 1 or a 0 if it is matching what your attribute needs to be. Again, you will use formulas to determine this, obviously. But once you create those formulas, create the tables, everybody can use it very easily, and 90 people don't have to figure out how to do those date calculations that you've done for them. Share this in your database, share it on a shared drive, send it out to your friends as a YXDB, and they will be extremely happy and buy you lunch one day. If this is helpful to you and it saves you a lot of time and effort, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like this video, share the link with your friends. Otherwise, have a great day. Find some good data out there and generate some really nice reports.